having a supreme belief in yourself. You do belong. You are worthy. You are capable, and trust me when I say this, there are a lot of folks sitting around the table that are multimillionaires, billionaires, and don't have half the stuff that you have going on.
Welcome to Business Buying for Financial Independence. I'm Tim Delaney, and I help young professionals buy small businesses so they can escape the 9-to-5 and take control of their time, income, and future. If that sounds like you, hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Today's guest is someone who embodies grit, patience, and what it really means to play the long game when it comes to building wealth through business ownership. Phil Wilkins started out on the classic corporate path, working in finance and accounting at a large company. But after reading an article about a franchisee, he saw his own future in a different light and decided to rewrite the script. Welcome, Phil, to Business Buying for Fi. Glad to have you here today.
Hey, Tim, thank you. It's great to be here.
So let's back up a little bit right to the start and talk a little bit about what you were doing before you became a business owner. What sparked your interest in buying a business?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I started in finance and accounting with Procter & Gamble, then transferred over to Baxter Healthcare because I felt like it was a square peg in a round hole. And so I started on the path of sales and sales management. And, was really calling on hospital companies, hospitals and then home care companies in a 4-state area. And, we were always going through corporate restructuring. I love the job, but we were always going through corporate restructuring. And one day I was in my basement and I was reading this magazine called Money Magazine. I had always been interested in building generational wealth. And even though I didn't have kids, I kind of grew up in a very working class household, but financial independence to me, even back then, was really important. And so I read this magazine, and on the cover was this guy with his hands like this, and French fries were raining on his head, and he had this big grin on his face and a big arch. And I thought, man, let me read this guy's deal and kind of understand what's going on. And when I tell you that a lightning bolt literally went down my back, when I read that article, I just felt like, what, this is it. This is what I, was kind of destined to do. I was selling medical supplies and basically food in liquid form, to the pharmacies. But burgers, fries, and a Coke is something that I can really relate to.
Nice. Yeah. So was there something in particular about that article that just hit you hard with was it just the food aspect of it?
Well, I think it was the food. I mean, obviously he was a black guy, so it was like I could relate to that. He was a minority and kind of overcame some things. And then he also, was on this corporate path, and it just resonated. I mean, everything about him, he wasn't like a big money earner at all. He was making like $60,000 at the time, but he just, put in the effort, put in the work, and that's where, that was kind of my path as well. So it was really inspiring. And I literally, Tim, when I tell you, I didn't know anything about manifestation back in the day, but I read that article 1,000 times. I mean, even to this day, I can pretty much get detail for detail about that, Leighton Hall and his wife, Brenda, and, where they worked and what they did and how long it took him to get those restaurants. And that was just, a million years ago.
So you almost embodied it as your own vision of where you wanted to be.
I digested that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I ate it,
Yeah. I was just listening to another podcast where the guy talked about reading his own vision daily, multiple times a day to kind of cement it in his mind.
And that was it. I mean, take it to bed, wake up in the morning, on the flights, everywhere.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then it was just a matter of, if I'm in a different city, I claimed it was research, but I would find my way to a restaurant and I would just steal their ideas. I'm looking at it like, oh, how did they promote this? How did they do that? Look at their operations. I mean, I took it all in. And so, I'm a big believer in that. If you're interested in a business, you got to do the groundwork and kind of do the research. And so that was just another way for me to get it in.
Yeah. Awesome. So you read this article about the McDonald's franchisee and you embody it as your own vision. And then I'm assuming that just overnight you became an owner of a McDonald's?
No. Well, see, the problem was at the time I was 26, right? And so 26 and broke. But I'll tell you something that I did do that I'm a big believer in and I incorporated in my business today. And that was networking. I started to network with everyone and I asked my insurance agent, quite frankly, who does he know? Because those folks are really connected. And when I speak to, financial advisors and insurance professionals, I talk about, how I leverage their relationships and how they can leverage their relationships really to grow business and add value to their clients. But I started networking with people, met an operator up in Rochester, New York. Guy's name was Herb Washington. Herb was kind enough to open his books and kind of show me that, hey, you know what? There's a great opportunity and you're a young guy. And so whatever you do, don't let money stand in your way. Right. And I took that to heart, man. And so I came back and finally got introduced to the people at McDonald's and they were like, hey, we like you. Can you apply? And so, I think that was kind of the power of the third party referral, because I got introduced to them by some very powerful people in the system and they assumed I had money. No, I had no money. I'm going through that checklist, willing to relocate, dedicate best efforts, and must have $100,000 of unencumbered cash. And I was like, ruh-roh, I got a problem. I don't have $100,000. And what the hell does unencumbered mean?
Yeah. Yep.
But, I had like $10,000. And so we applied, got rejected. And I remember sitting around the table, and this is for all the folks that just don't feel like, I'm just getting my head bashed in and I don't know where to go next. And I'm going to give up. And I remember talking to my wife and saying, I feel like calling this guy. And she said, what do we have to lose? And I'm like, nothing, I'm already broke. So I pick up the phone and, I can't say the rest is history. The rest was, you don't have enough money. And just kind of being a salesperson, I was like, you know what? I want to keep the relationship alive. I want to keep communication open. And so I just said, hey, can I stay in touch with you? And he was like, yeah, we'd like you to. But it was at that moment, Tim, when he said, yeah, you know what? We'd like you to stay in touch with us, that I knew I was going to be a McDonald's owner.
Yes.
Even though I wasn't accepted, even though I hadn't started training, the fact that he was willing to keep the door open, I knew that this was going to happen. He wanted to sell restaurants. I just didn't meet the qualifications at the time. So I put a plan together and I began to write him a note every month for 3 years. And I was pretty consistent with that. And it was like, hey, I'm at 10,000 next month. I'm going to be at 12. I'm at 12. I'm going to be at 15. And what happened was I got very good at projecting cash flow in my own household. And this is the thing that I'd leave with my audience is, if you can't project your cash flow in your own house, how are you ever going to do it in a business, right? And it's so simple. So you can get this practice today by literally like, hey, where's the bill? What's coming up? What's going out? And where am I in this process? And I just became very good at that. And after 3 years, they're like, okay, man, we're going to get you started. And I thought, great, I'm going to be able to quit my job because I was calling on medical companies in 4 states. And he's like, no, you're going to keep your job, but on weekends and evenings, you're going to work in the business and you're going to do it for free. And
that's how nice of them.
You all are straight gangsters. You're hoods. You got me working here for free. But it took 3 years of that. So all total, it took me 6 years to get my first restaurant. But, I never went into work, even during that time, thinking, I can't believe I'm doing this, or I hate this, or whatever else. It was always, what am I going to learn today? What am I going to see today? And I'm just grateful to be in this position.
That's awesome. Great attitude. And I want to back up a second, back to your actual application. So you're reading through the requirements. It says you need $100,000 of unencumbered cash, which you
Right.
clearly don't have,
Right.
let alone whether it's encumbered or not.
Right.
But you still decided to submit the application.
I
Most
still
people
decide.
would have said, well, I don't meet the qualifications, throw it away.
Right.
I think that's a huge lesson for a lot of people is just because something's written on paper doesn't mean that you shouldn't give it a shot anyway.
Absolutely.
That's,
Absolutely. Because you just never know. And this was
Yeah.
not, I didn't come under a special program. I didn't buy a lease thing or whatever, like when I was able to execute the deal in 6 years, we did it conventional. We put down 25%. My first business cost $789,000. For those of you that do the math, you could figure out, hey, we went from $10,000 to that dollar amount plus a little bit more for cash reserves that we needed. So my wife and I did a great job of really living below our means, clamping down, being committed, and just getting after it, for all those years to come up with that downstroke.
Yeah. And that persistence of writing a letter every month for 3 years, keeping them up to date, keeping the doors open is another huge lesson there for people. And then you touched on the running your own household like a business, which, whether or not it's like a business or not, but being able to manage cash flow is amazing practice for getting into a business. It's cash flow. I'm in a lot of different business, entrepreneurial mastermind groups. The number one thing that every single business owner has in common is cash flow. Doesn't matter how good, some of the best, fastest growing businesses have cash flow problems. And some of the most struggling ones it's all cash flow.
Oh yeah. I talk to NEMT. I do a lot of consulting in the NEMT space. And we can get to that, and that's non-emergency medical transportation. But these guys are small business owners providing rides for people who are on Medicaid and Medicare, very vulnerable, sick population, typically elderly. But, the major issue there is cash flow. And whether, McDonald's was, it was a cash-rich business. I mean, it was retail, et cetera. But in many ways, it was like a mini manufacturing plant. Now, we didn't have to send out, payment invoices, and have accounts receivable because we were paid on the minute. But when I talk to business owners and the folks that I consult with, the biggest issue that many of them have is, they say 30 days, but they're stretching me out to 45 to 60 to 90. What do I do? And I'm like, you don't have a line of credit? You're not ready for this? Whoa, we got some work to do. And so that's a big issue, really big issue.
Yeah. I remember when I was buying my retail store years ago, a lot of people said to me, oh, it's awesome. You're in a cash business. And at first I didn't understand what they were saying. And it was that comparison to having accounts receivable that people have to pay for my goods before they leave the store. So I have my cash.
Yeah, but even now though, you're in a cash business, you probably still accept credit card, right?
Yep, exactly. And that was my mentality was,
on Fridays, you have that big weekend and then you don't get that money swept over until Tuesday.
Yep.
And of course, on Monday, you've got, everything that's due, your bills from your suppliers, your insurance and everything. We went through the same thing in the restaurant.
Yep. 100%. The weekends when the cash comes in, but the credit card companies like to hold it till Tuesday. So
exactly.
It's always fun.
Yep.
And then the persistence, again, writing letters every day or every month for 3 years and then working for free for 3 years to learn the business. I don't know many people that would want to do that. What was the mindset of just being willing and able to put yourself through that for such a long time?
I think that goes back to foundational, to be honest with you, Tim. I grew up in a situation, in many ways where my mom was sick at an early age. My dad worked 5 jobs. My mom was a high school dropout. They were married for 50 years. It was a great love story. But when she became ill, I learned hard work. I started going to work with my dad, around the age of 10, and I was vacuuming, cleaning toilets and doing those kinds of things because, part of he cleaned a bank, a library, doctor's office, delivered the mail as a fireman. And so at night, he would clean the bank and a library. And so I would go to work with him to take pressure off of him so that he could be home early, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big issue, kind of doing that. And then I think I just had a number of events that occurred in my childhood. I remember in 8th grade, our school caught on fire, and so imagine being 8th grade, ADHD, school catches on fire, and we had to finish the school year in a coliseum with our classroom separated by curtains, right? So I'm telling you this to kind of set it up so that when I went to college, I wasn't prepared. I did not score well on the standardized test. I had to take a course and sign a contract to get into college. It was a struggle. But once I learned the process and the systems, I became a Dean's List student. Then I was playing football at the time. And this is where the name BYA comes from, and really of honor and out of respect for my coach that I had, who was just this master motivator and would scream BYA, bust your ass every day at the top of his lungs. And I just learned a lot from him, even though it was a short period of time. And so I think all of that kind of built up this resilience and this persistence that I needed. And so I looked at, this challenge before me really as just, it was an opportunity that I was going to knock down. I wasn't going to be denied, and I was going to figure out a way to win.
Awesome. McDonald's has always seemed to me, and I'm sure to other people, as some kind of the iconic one of the biggest franchises out there, like the golden goose of franchises. I kind of hold them on a pedestal for what they've done and what they continue to do as an organization. So first of all, it almost seems unattainable for most people, but obviously you've shown that with some grit and determination, you can get there. And then once you get into that system, how did you find the franchise system as a whole? Was it did you feel constrained as somebody that had an entrepreneurial ambition mindset, or was it freeing in a way because they had everything so systematized? And how was that process of being involved?
I think there's a couple things in franchising. And one, McDonald's is one of many great systems. Do I think it's the best system today? No, I don't, to be honest with you. I think Chick-fil-A is the best system and probably has the best opportunity. And if it were up to me and my sons were looking at a franchise system, I would probably say go to Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. Even though you don't quote unquote own it, it's a joint venture. It kicks off a lot of cash. You're working 6 days a week. People want to work with you, and you could build your assets, BYA, somewhere else, right? Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, no, I think a lot of franchise companies, and for those that want to be a franchisee, I'm more than happy to kind of coach you through that. But franchisees do a great job of teaching you their system, mm-hmm. right? And their business, not necessarily how to run your business, right? Mm-hmm. So they teach you how to make a burger and fry, but when it comes to, making payroll and making those business decisions and investment decisions, that is on you. And so you have to figure out, what works for you and what's the best path for you. I was fortunate that my training did last 3 years because I was able to see a lot of different people's operations. I saw operators who had to retire because of chronic fatigue syndrome. They were worn out. They didn't have the people, the systems in place, and this job was running them in their lives, and just ran them out of the business because they were exhausted. I've seen people, who have great success, and those folks had the products and the processes and the systems in place and the teams in place and the volume that was there. And I don't think that could ever be mistaken. You've got to have volume in that business. And, if you don't have volume, you're struggling, and that's no fun.
Yeah. Speaking of volume, you didn't stop at just one McDonald's franchise, did you?
No, I mean, we eventually got up to 8. I owned over 20 restaurants, in my career from McDonald's and another system, but the most that we had at any one time was 8.
Okay. And did you start all those from scratch or did you acquire
No,
some existing?
acquisition. And, now we built, we built 5 with an outside system, and I had left the McDonald's system for a while, did something else, and got invited back to McDonald's, and then we built 2 or 3 McDonald's standalone units from scratch. So we probably built like 8 restaurants overall, and then bought 12 outright from other folks.
Okay. When you were making those acquisitions of the existing restaurants, what were some of the key factors that you looked at that influenced your decision to buy them and the price points that they ended up costing?
Yeah, I think for us the key decision was obviously the cash flow. And then when you were buying a franchise system, you had to consider what are the rents, the service fees, all of that. But ultimately, in our business, it was a cash flow business, and what was the multiple that they were asking, and then begin to really look at who are the team members that will be left behind, and what are their strengths, and what are their weaknesses, and and then the trade area as a whole. You really have to understand that trade area. And what's going on in that area, because you got to do your research, because things can change. Traffic patterns can change, laws can change, whatever, that could dramatically impact your business if you're especially running a retail operation. Those are all things that we need to look at.
That's good points. So that trade area, a lot of people get caught up in whether or not the business itself is a good investment or a good deal. But looking at that whole market area and what's going on.
I mean, we would dig into things, like if there were check cashing places nearby, laundromats nearby, those would all kind of give you details as well as to who are the clients, in the area. And I had a variety of different locations, and certain inner city locations, for example, may have higher insurance costs, higher crime rates. Those things dramatically impact your cash flow, and so you don't think about it, but if there's a difference of $40,000 or $50,000 a year in cash flow compared to that inner city location versus that suburban location or that rural location, because of insurance rates, higher property costs, et cetera, that's $50,000. You're still running that thing probably 24 hours a day or 12, 17 hours a day, just like this person is, but they're making $50,000 more than you. And you start to do the math on that over 20. And then if you get into multiple units and you compound that, that's a lot of wealth that's being evaporated, and so you have to be very conscientious and very aware of where and what you are buying. And then even, is it something that you would want to, or that you will have the opportunity to sell on the back end? Mm-hmm. So, for example, we talk about a situation in Lexington where I was operating. I knew that city was a great little market, right? You had 300,000 people, Lexington, Kentucky, surrounded by horse farms in a condensed area, highly educated, a big draw with University of Kentucky coming in every single day. Real estate prices were inflated. They loved burgers and fries, and there were no corporate restaurants in the area. So I knew that those restaurants had a premium tied to them. So when I was able to figure out, it's time to exit, I could pretty much command my price, because they were all family-owned businesses, and we had built those businesses up to a point where at first no one really wanted them, but because we tore some down, rebuilt them, they were highly desirable. when we left.
Nice. Yeah. So thinking about the exit strategy from day one is
Yes,
important.
correct.
Knowing what you're going to do, how you're going to get out of it. Whether it's, for some people, it's holding on to it forever and putting a manager in place. If that's your
Right.
exit strategy, great. But
Yeah.
making sure that you think about that and who you're going to sell it to, why they would want to buy it.
All those factors. I mean, you looked at like in the franchise game, for example, we had 20-year terms. Now, maybe in some other business, it might be a rental situation or whatever else. I wanted to sell somewhere around year, 12, 13, so that a person could get in it and they still had 7 years to pay it off. There was still plenty of time on the contract. Then they could renew the contract. And then yet I had paid it off probably in, year 6, 7. And I had a few years to stack some cash, and I could command the premium price. So you just have to be strategic about it. It's the same with probably, your real estate businesses or your retail business. You have to think through those issues.
Yep. Yeah. And that's speaking of my retail wine and liquor. There are a ton of stores for sale right now in my area, and that I've got more and more people asking me for advice and help analyzing them. They're interested in possibly buying them, but the landscape is changing very quickly. There's legislation potentially getting passed very soon that will allow grocery stores to sell wine in New York, which will drastically affect the profitability of my store and all the stores.
Yeah.
And so that's why some owners are trying to get out right now real quick and find the buyer that's not paying attention to that aspect of it, because the books look great, but the environment's not the best right now. And
yeah, I mean, Wegmans up there could be big competitor.
They're a big driver, and they're good at what they do in the grocery space. So they will be good at the wine business as well, I'm sure. Build your assets, BYA. You have been able to utilize your success in business to build some slightly more passive real estate opportunities as well, right?
Yeah. For me, I've always been attracted to real estate, and I think it's the perfect complement for a business owner when thinking about divesting or diversifying is what I'm really trying to say. Their revenue streams and really just kind of protecting themselves. I got into real estate. I probably bought my first home back in 2000. As far as rental property, and then I just kind of had that for a while, that one property. But then once we finally got out of McDonald's, my boys wanted no part of the restaurants and those kinds of things. So it was really an opportunity to kind of go into this space. And so we started really kind of buying up my old block. I mean, to be honest, my family home was 2 blocks away from college campus and 2 blocks away from town. And, it was a great student rental. And so I ended up buying my sister out of the property. We had fixed it up and got it a rental history. But since then, I, bought both properties on the side of my family home, one across the street, one up the street. And so we're just kind of starting to add pieces to that puzzle. And they're excited about that. They kind of like that kind of thing. So for me, it's all about, building for the next generation. And I want to find things that, they might be interested in to kind of keep that legacy alive.
Awesome. You had to build your wealth the hard way. You talked about coming up and putting in the work. You didn't have anything to start with. What's your message to somebody that's listening that wants to buy a business, but feels like they don't have enough money or connections to get started?
Well, I think today, with ChatGPT, with the internet, you can start, businesses relatively with little money down or, whatever. I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing is, and I always used to think I wanted to be a speaker. I wanted to be a consultant. And I remember going into my quote unquote office. I bought my first house when I was like 24, and I know that's hard for people to do today, but even then I would spend Sundays kind of locked in my office, if you will, and just dream and think about what is it that I would love to do, you know. And even then I was thinking I'd love to be a speaker. I'd love to, help inspire people, even though I really didn't know, I didn't own McDonald's or anything else then, right? But I just knew the challenges that I had in life. And I think today, you've got to think about what skills do you have? What can you do that could add value to people? And oftentimes that doesn't require a lot of money, but if you do, I think, what you are passionate about, you will attract money. You will attract it. And you're probably the same, with your real estate thing. I have people approaching me all the time. Hey, I'd love to partner with you on the real estate side. I've never really had a partner until recently. And then that is a partner that I have known. I knew his dad. His dad was my mentor. And now this guy has been my property manager for, since 2000. And we're finally partnering. Now, I'm not interested in doing syndications and everything like that, but I do have people approach me because they see the passion and they know that, I take it seriously. I'm going to be a great steward of their investment, but I just haven't, I don't have an interest in that right now. It's just not what I'm interested in. But yeah. I think there's opportunities out there, and Chat GBT,
Yep.
the AI, man, I mean, that's just a powerful tool.
It sure is. I think it's opening doors for a lot of people that would have previously felt like doors were closed to them. I think it's a game changer all the way around. I tell everybody that will listen, the sooner you start playing with it and using it, practicing with it. Yeah. It's
so funny, man. I had a conversation like that with my friend yesterday, and I did this exercise, and I'm going to, and it was, you go on Chat GBT and you say, basically, tell me the brutal, honest truth, about what you know about me. And it spit out a game plan. And I was like, holy cow, but it motivated me, and inspired me, because it's like, hey, you know what? You've lived a great life, but you've got, a little bit more juice in you, man. And here's what you could do to make it happen, yeah, the thing might make some errors, and it's only as good as the information that you feed it. But for the most part, I think it's just a phenomenal tool.
It certainly is. And it just continues to get better every day, and more other tools similar to it are coming out and compounding on it as well, which is, it's amazing. And I use it multiple times a day for various things. And I kind of equate it to what the internet was back in the early 90s, mid 90s. I was
going to say, it's like, we're going to age ourselves here, dude.
I know, but I don't care. It's,
you remember when microwaves came out? Remember when they made fire, Tim?
Yeah. I remember sitting around the cave that day. The first spark. But yeah, it's because there were people back then. There were people even into the early 2000s that said, I don't need the internet. What do I need the internet for?
Right.
And now, like, my 96-year-old grandmother can't go a day without using the internet. Like, it's there. It's part of life. And the better you are at it, and the earlier you jump on it, the better you're going to be. And anybody that's still saying they don't think they need ChatGPT or AI, good luck in the next 5 years. Cause
and you know what, everywhere. I think I've got 3 sons, and one of my youngest is 21. Right. And you think about all of the technology changes that he's seen and all the things that he's seen in his world, and just thinking about that, how do you, I mean, if I'm him, if I'm a kid who's 21, 22 years old, 24, 25, whatever, and I don't mean to be offensive and say kid, I apologize. If I'm a young adult and I'm that age, I could just think about, here's, man, what happened to me in the last 20 years, and here's how resilient I have become as a result of this, And I mean, you have gone through a lot, in your short time frame. So that is a strength. That is a skill that your generation has, that, even as much as we went through and I went through, the last 20 years have just been incredible.
Yep, they sure have been. I guess on that note, what is one piece of advice? Like, what's the most important piece of advice that you would either give yourself as a mid 20-year-old, or that you give your sons right now?
Yeah, for me, I think one is, and I wrote about this a little bit yesterday, and I talked about it on my last podcast, and that is having a supreme belief in yourself. You do belong. You are worthy. You are capable, and trust me when I say this, there are a lot of folks sitting around the table that are multimillionaires, billionaires, and don't have half the stuff that you have going on, in between your ears or in your heart, right? So I think that's very, very critical. And I think the other piece is, just having a positive mindset, that great things are going to happen. Life is hard. Life is tough. It's unfair sometimes, but overall, it beats the alternative, right? I mean, so, having that positive mindset, and I was given a little podcast on it the other day, and the Harvard Business Review did this study, Tim, and they found that like sales professionals that had a positive mental outlook sold 56% more than their peers, And if I'm a business owner, if I'm a sales professional, whatever, I want that kind of outlook, I want that kind of outlook in life. And so I would just encourage people, the glass is half full. It might be going through some changes or whatever else. You might have some turbulence along the way, but I'm a big believer in, being positive and moving forward.
Positivity is such a underrated thing. I think I for a long time, I kind of wrote off being like envisioning and those types of things as kind of out there woo type stuff that didn't matter. But the more I realize the power of those things is incredible. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about locking yourself in your office on Sundays. And before you had anything really substantial going for you, saying, I'm going to be a speaker. I want to teach other people and coach other people. Like, it's for a lot of people, their thought process would be, how could I ever do that? I'm not doing anything right now. But you had this belief in yourself that, to me, it probably, okay, you're not your end, but your bigger vision was to go help and teach and coach other people. You found a way to fill in that gap in the meantime with a massive amount of success, so that you had something going for you to go do all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and especially when I think about the startup phase, if I could even add to what you had asked, what was the difference? I think as a entrepreneur or a young entrepreneur in that startup phase, be conservative. I see a lot of influencers today, and I just kind of shake my head. It's like, oh, I've got $1 million business. That does not mean you are making $1 million. Like, you got to pretty much break that down into thirds, and maybe even less than that. But a third of it, is like earmark it for taxes, a third for operations, whatever. But, take a couple years, take 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever, to what is that saying? Like, live like no one else so that you can live like no one else, or whatever, something, I mean, basically be conservative, I remember my wife, even, we had the restaurants, we were doing well. We were, we had 4 McDonald's restaurants. We were making good money, but she was always saying, well, where is the reward? Like, where is it? I'm still driving cars, and I still to this day drive trucks, that have 192,000 miles on them. I don't care about that stuff, So it to me, it's like, be conservative, live within your means, and then you have options, like you'll have options like no other. And so when I think about your audience and I think about, my sons who are young, those are the messages, man. I mean, don't get over your skis, because it's hard to peel that back when you do,
Yep. Yeah. That conservative, being not necessarily frugal, but being conscious of where your money is going and what you're doing with it on a personal level, back to that of whether you're saving up for a business or whether you're running a successful business, being conscious that your money is being put to use. And
well, you want to have the money on reserve so that when it's time to play, you can play.
Yeah.
Right. And as an entrepreneur, my thing was, oh, you know what? I want to, people like in the corporate space, it might be, I want to make, 250, 400,000, 500,000, whatever. And for me, it was more like, okay, I want to take what I need, and there was a difference. So it's like, you know what? I had a nice, comfortable salary, but then if I needed something extra, I could go grab it, take it as a draw, whatever. And it's no big deal. That's a different space, man. That's a different space.
Yeah.
And then I think the final thing, the third point would be diversify. Don't be afraid to diversify a little bit outside of your primary business. Like even though we were a small company, we set up a 401k. We were investing in real estate, and we, you do those things not only to build assets, outside of your business, but worst case scenario is if something goes bad, that's a veil that is very difficult to penetrate, or, you've got some reserves, in addition to what you think your business might be worth, because it may not be worth what you think it may be.
It's probably not. That's
right.
Fairness. Right. Most of us far overvalue what our businesses are worth.
Right.
Because we're
so
optimistic.
You know what? If it's kicking off that cash and you can do that, that's just another way to kind of build your assets outside of your primary business, and it's very beneficial.
Nice. Let's talk a little bit about BYA, build your assets or bust your ass. How did that idea evolve, and what's I guess how did that evolve?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I played for a coach that was a master motivator, and he screamed it at the top of his lungs every day, BYA every day. And it stood for bust your ass, plain and simple. But I learned some lessons that I think are applicable to a business owner. And in his business, he needed his employees, quote unquote, linebackers, if you will, to, get over the bags, shed a block, and form tackle. And he started that every practice with those drills. And he would watch them from day one so that he could measure your improvement. And typically he did it, and he had us doing it under great stress, where he was screaming, yelling, in our face, whatever. But it was a very intense kind of time frame. But it taught me some lessons. And the lessons are, hey, you know what? In your business, you probably have 3 or 4 key drivers every single day that you have to pay attention to. And if you do that every single day, and there might be times that you have to perform under great stress, but if you pay attention to those details, just like he did in his business, you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. And so as a business owner, I always want to know, what are the key 3 or 4 drivers in that business, that I can really focus on, that will help me build, the assets. But BYA came about when I retired from McDonald's. I had a great friend who was at a healthcare company, and he was actually my old manager back in the day at Baxter Healthcare. And he's like, I've got this role for you. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, I want you to be, talk to the CEO and they brought me in as a senior vice president of social determinants of health. So in that role, I was going out, working with communities, because I did a lot of that with McDonald's, and then also working with our small business owners that happen to be NEMT providers, non-emergency medical transportation providers, and they provide rides for those folks that are on Medicaid and Medicare, and recruit them. They were looking to kind of upgrade, if you will, to a more professional type of person. So I was recruiting transportation providers, working on strategic partnerships that could make their business more efficient, and kind of helping them grow and scale. And so when they decided to make a change, and I was on the executive leadership team, and I thought that was cool, because how do you go from franchising to be on the executive leadership team of a publicly traded company? So when they decided to change, I kind of thought I could do this for myself, and I wanted to resume my speaking and consulting, because even when I was a McDonald's owner, I was doing a lot of speaking and consulting work. And so I thought this is just a great opportunity to do that. So today with BYA, I speak at corporate functions and for organizations, helping them, motivate them on, entrepreneurship, life, resilience, sports teams, that kind of stuff. And then on the consulting side, I work with small business owners and, NEMT professionals, and help them grow and scale their business. And, then still work on strategic partnerships and how do we help these folks improve their business and their lives and make connections and referrals for them.
Awesome. And that's something you touched on in our previous conversation as well, is like paying attention to the details consistently, even under stress, which is something that you got ingrained into in college, and it seems like you still embody that to this day. Is there a specific instance or time during your business career or BYA that really that practice jumped out and helped you out in a way? Too many to count.
Take me down this path, right? I think the final few months of McDonald's, I was ready to get out, and the pandemic struck, right? So we were in the process of selling, the pandemic struck, and overnight our business dropped 30% overnight. Then I had and this is kind of also, when is it time to leave, right? Then I had a 10-foot wide by 30-foot deep sinkhole at my largest restaurant. So you can imagine there was a pipe that was underneath the ground. The McDonald's team didn't even know. It created a void. It collapsed. Thankfully, no one was in the drive-through lane at the time. But the entire, and the pipe ran across our property, and, we were kind of like the owners of it, as well as into the next property and down to a creek. So it wasn't only us, it was the Pizza Hut next door, but the entire thing just had to be blocked off. So imagine being down 30%, then your busiest restaurant gets hit. Then we had, Tim, I'm not playing here. We had a tornado hit my second busiest restaurant. Gary signs, road signs, air conditioning units, all kinds of stuff. Then I had a fight that went viral on World Star. Then I had a manager that liked to make movies, and I'm going to leave it at that. But that was like my last 4 months, and it was like, you know what? I cannot wait to get out of this. I'm ready. I understand it's time. But it was really about paying attention to details at that moment and just staying focused on the task at hand. So I'm not telling you these things just to tell you these things. I've lived this, I've experienced this. But it was, it was a great character building moment.
There you go with the positivity again. Just spinning that into.
It gave me a push to my next. But you know what? I never will forget. And this was. in many ways, to me, entrepreneurship is kind of a spiritual journey as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not like, I'm very spiritual. I can't say I'm a Bible thumper or anything like that. I can't read all kinds of verses of the Bible, but I do remember like lying in bed one night in my apartment. I had an apartment where our restaurants were because I didn't want to go back and forth. But I remember like lying in bed one night and literally tears coming to my eyes and wetting my pillow and just kind of thinking, you know what? This is a chapter that's over, and it was sad. I mean, it was sad that it was a chapter was over, but then it was like, if I've got to go through all this, what I'm going through right now to get to where I ultimately need to be, I'm okay with it, And I think that's where that mental toughness, that resilience, that attitude that, you know what, I'm going to learn from this experience. I'm not going to lose. I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to get better because of it. And I'm going to win. And I think that's where that mindset, that BYA mindset, in my opinion, comes into play, and as an entrepreneur, I will never forget, Tim, and I could just go on and on and on with stories, but I will never forget when I first bought the stores and I'm in the basement and I had a tax bill, I had food, I had everything coming up all at once. And there was a cash flow gap of about $21,000. And I literally was like, I know you didn't put me here to fail. And you just have to have that supreme belief that you can figure it out, that you were not put here to fail, that you are going to get through this, that you can get through this. And I would just say, you know what, just take a deep breath, relax, and take it day by day. Win effing day, like that. I mean, at the end of the day, that became a motto, when I was going through all that, just win the day, just win the effing day and just make great decisions and it'll come to pass.
Yeah. It's powerful. Very powerful. I was going to ask one more question, but that was a pretty powerful way to wrap it up, but I think I'll ask it anyway. So you talk about, you use the word retiring a couple times, which you retired from McDonald's. You have the same mentality of retirement as I think I do. Just means you're jumping into something completely new and different, and still working hard and enjoying life at the same time. What's your definition of success and retirement, I guess?
I don't know if I have a definition of retirement. I mean, I've been fortunate throughout my career where I've taken breaks, like if I was between sales or whatever else. And I took off, 18 months before. And I thought, at 45, I sold my business and I could have just been done then, right?
Yeah.
I was too young. I wasn't ready. And I was nuts. I'm a people person, right? I enjoy being out. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy doing different stuff. So for me, being retired, going to play golf, sitting around the house all day would just absolutely drive me crazy, right?
Likewise.
I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
And plus, I just feel like, being engaged and communicating and working with people keeps you sharp mentally. And so I want to go to the gym. I want to enjoy that, but then I got stuff I want to do, and so I'm still dreaming of stuff. I mean, I love the real estate game. I love that. I could talk about real estate and do that. That's probably like my new passion. But for me, it's about how do I set my kids up for success? That's my focus today. What do they want to do? What do they want to do? And how do I set them up for success and the future generations? I have a grandson that has autism. I'm very focused on, helping him and that next generation so that, they can be successful.
Awesome. Tell us where people can connect with you. there's anything that you want people to take away specifically, or where they can follow you and find you. And
Yeah. So LinkedIn is a great spot for me. Phil Wilkins, I probably have my biggest following there. I am on Instagram at Phil Wilkins BYA. And then they can visit my website, BYA every day. And I would love for them to join our network. And then if I can help them at all, if you're a business owner or even a professional, and I really started this company for people that wanted to create generational wealth and just kind of find their path. Like I was that dude. I was in corporate America for a number of years, and I was like, there's got to be a path for me, and how do I get there, and believe me, if I can do it, and reach what I've been able to attain with ADHD and all the other things that I had going on in life, I think a lot of folks can.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share with the audience that we haven't already delved into?
Yeah, I really appreciate you, Tim. I think you're doing phenomenal work and phenomenal job. And
thank you.
Like once again, I just hope people connect with me. I want to do a BYA tour. So like if they have organizations or groups that they would like me to come to and speak for, I'd love to motivate and inspire their group and their teams.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links in the show notes below. So definitely take the time to connect with Phil. He's an awesome person, super inspirational. I've enjoyed my conversations with him. And we connected on Threads, which I've been loving as a way to connect with people lately.
Yeah.
Definitely suggest everybody jump over there and connect with us on Threads and LinkedIn. But Phil, I really, really appreciate your time and the energy you bring to everything. It was super inspirational, super motivational, and just a lot of great lessons for anybody out there aspiring to get into business or buy a business or just build generational wealth, as you said. So really appreciate having you here today. I will follow up with you sometime soon. I definitely want to stay in touch with you. And for everybody out there listening, I would really, really appreciate it if you took a second to hit the subscribe or add or follow button on your podcast app that you're listening to so that you can stay informed when I drop more episodes. Thanks for your time today. Look forward to talking to everybody else again soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Tim. BYA.
BYA. Thanks for listening to Business Buying for Financial Independence. If you're serious about owning your time and building long-term wealth, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.